Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Happy Sabbath. Very beautiful day. Wonderful to be here to celebrate God's creation, His rest day that He's created for us. Wonderful day to be here. I'd like you to turn with me to Isaiah chapter 14 this afternoon. And I'd like to begin my message today with, I think, one of the most cautionary tales of the Bible. We get to see in words the very thoughts of an angelic being that caused him to turn against and rebel against his Creator, against God. Isaiah chapter 14, and I want to read just three scriptures here. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. You'll have to pay attention up here as we go through this. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of heaven. I will sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High. You know, the month of June is called Pride Month. It is said to be a time to celebrate being proud and letting everyone know that they're proud for being who they are in their sexual identity and their lifestyle. It used to be a day, and now it's been expanded to a month. I'd like to take a look at the concept of pride today, and let me ask the question first, is pride always bad? This is a very big subject, I realize, and probably one that we can discuss for hours afterwards, and we probably will if we have time. But let me go back to a story. I recall many years ago interviewing with the minister before, I guess he was interviewing me to fill out a recommendation for my application to Ambassador College. Actually, that minister's sitting right here on the front row right now. And I remember sitting there and him asking me a question, and the question was that I'm assuming it came from, the questionnaire that they were supposed to fill out. I don't know if he had particularly written this down himself. I'm not sure. But the question was, what are your strong characteristics and what are your weak characteristics? And I recall sitting there as an 18-year-old, being able to come up with my weaknesses. And I remember saying a few of those, but when it came to my strengths, my strong characteristics, I struggled to come with even one of them. It was difficult for me. And I've thought back on that many times, and I've wondered why I couldn't come up with any strong characteristics at that time. And I've since come to the conclusion over the years that it's probably my surroundings, where I grew up, I grew up in the church, and there's a certain message that's put out, and it's ingrained with me in a belief that I was nothing but a hunk of junk. Now, you probably heard and read that before, and that's good and that's bad. For whatever reason, I latched on to this unconscious internal milieu that I should never catalog positive aspects about myself, that would be boastful, that would be prideful, thus sinful. And it was so bad that I was embarrassed to receive any awards. I can't tell you how many awards I got for best sportsmanship. It doesn't matter if it was high school, in college, at church. I got several of those awards for best sportsmanship. And I always wondered, why did I get that award? And I think that some of those things kind of rubbed off on me, and I probably did some good things at that time. So, I didn't keep track much of my accomplishments or successes because I conditioned myself to think that it was vain and it was prideful. And that translated into this sort of a deer in the headlight look when he asked me what my strengths were. Now, I tell you this as we begin for the benefit of our young people because I want to tell you for a moment here what pride is not before we go into what pride is. Pride is not keeping track of your accomplishments or your successful moments in life or your fruitful endeavors. nor is it having confidence in your work or your gifts or your talents or endeavors, nor is it understanding and building on your strengths and shoring up your weaknesses, nor is it beaming with joy over the successes of your children or your grandchildren. If, the biggest two-letter word in the alphabet or in the English language, if we credit God for all of those things. And that's the key. James chapter 4, verse 6, you don't need to turn there. It says, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. The Greek word for proud means to show one's self above others, an overestimate of one's means or merits, despising others or treating them with contempt. That's what James says about the word proud. That's what it means. You know, if you want to get to the top of a mountain, and we're going to use the mountain as a metaphor for any challenge or task or work or whatever it's going to be, that you're trying to get to the top, right? And you're going to stand tall because, you know, you've worked and you've stretched and you clawed and you sweated and you put a lot of effort into getting there. Along the way, we have to realize that God is helping us every single step of the way. He's aiding us. We need the arms that he gave us to claw ourselves up. We need the legs that he gave us to dig in and to move. We need the lungs to take in the oxygen that he makes for us so we can do the work that we need to do to get to the top. We even need the mountain that he built to be able to scale, to climb. He did all of that. And he wants us to struggle and get there. You see, we should credit him for the successes that we have in life and giving us even the talents or the gifts that we have to do things to be where we're at. You know, growing up, I've always had a gift for running. I don't know why, I just did. I set track records in every school that I ran. And I think, at least a year ago, I still hold the record at my high school that I set 36 years ago in one of the track meets. But I didn't give myself that gift of running. It didn't come from me. I recognized that God gave me the gift, and I had to work hard to cultivate it. And at times, I didn't work as hard as I should have worked. God gave me a talent, and I didn't build on that, I think, in the way that I could have built on it. But God gave me the gift to permit me to do what I did. And I think in some ways, it was partially maybe to be a witness to others around me in high school that I didn't run on Sabbath, and I didn't go to the state meet because of the Sabbath, and people took notice of that. And at some point, maybe it'll make a difference. Some of you have great talents that helped you achieve great successes in life. Many of you are good at something particular, very good at what you do. And you may be great at what you do. You just need to give credit to the giver of life and the giver of gifts for what you have, and don't boast in yourself, but boast in God who works in you and through you. Remember, it was Jesus Christ himself who said that, he didn't do the works that didn't come from himself, right? It was the Father who did it through him. So if Jesus, our elder brother, says that, how are we to say anything different? How can we be any better? Now, there's another way to get to the top of the mountain rather than the hard work. And that way is to push everybody else down around you. That makes the mountain a little bit shorter. So you can not take so much effort, not put so much work in if you kick and trip and maim everybody around you, so you can get over them and you claw right over them. You know, the sure sign of a prideful person is the demeaning and putting down of another, because it makes you feel better about yourself and seemingly lifts you higher. In fact, it's the sign of a narcissist, someone who loves themselves to the exclusion of others. And I think that's part of the human condition. We're all narcissistic at some level, and I think that we're all very prideful to some extent. But it's a battle that we have to fight every day of our lives. And this brings me to what I believe is a large cause of pride. Now, not all. There are many causes of pride, I think. But I think one of them that I think we see in Pride Month specifically, and that is shame. Now, I think it can be argued that shame can go both ways. There's some people that are unashamed. There are some people that are shamed. Shame can cause pride, but it seems that there's no shame with celebrating Pride Month, doesn't it? It seems that nobody has any shame about it. And it may be that their conscience has been so seared that they have none. Shame bringing about pride. It almost seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? The problem often is that it's shame that people have goes unrecognized. They don't realize it, or it may be subconscious. Let me try to expand on this a little bit if I can. Look at 2 Timothy 2, and let's look at verse 15. Paul wrote to the young evangelist Timothy about how to live his ministry, about how we should live our lives. And he says this to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:15, "Be diligent to present yourselves approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." So to live a life of not being ashamed, of being unashamed, is a life that is approved by God. He's approved of us, and that's unashamed. That's a way to live life. That means that I can stand and you can stand in front of God, and we can take, account for the things that we've said, the things that we do, the things we think, the actions that we've taken, the thoughts we have, because we're unashamed by it, because we know we fall in line with what God has said this is the way to live life. So when the word pierces us, there is a shame that comes from it if there's a changing that needs to take place. But if there's not, we can stand in front of him unashamed, because we have lived by his acceptable standards of life. But how is it possible? How is it possible for anyone to stand in front of God unashamed? How is that possible? Well, ultimately, no one can do it. You can't do it, which is why it takes the sacrifice of Jesus Christ to be completely unashamed before God. Only he can bring us in line with God and give us the dignity of life, of living a life that is worthy of our calling. But we do the very best we can now, and we give the very best effort that we can. And that helps us to be unashamed because we have done what God tells us to do. And when we fall out of line with God and do things our way, there is a shame that takes place. And it should be there to try and help wake us up to say, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. Let's do something different. But to be shamed, brethren, means to recognize that there's a standard by which we ought to follow. It seems right. You've got to have some standard. Otherwise, how would you know it's shameful? In order to cover that shame and make excuses for our actions and justify ourselves, this is where pride comes in. Because then pride steps in and it prevents us from acknowledging our human weaknesses and our wrongdoings. And in this sense, pride attempts to cover up our shortcomings. Me? There's nothing wrong with me. Why would you think there's something wrong with me? You need to accept my lifestyle. You need to encourage me on my way of living. That's pride talking. And sin is no longer something that is done with the head held low or in the shadows. It is now done in the full open view with the chest puffed up. This shame-driven pride makes us too uncomfortable to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I made a mistake. This shame-driven pride says, be happy with who you are. Be prideful of your sexual identity. And let everyone know that you're not about to change. This is who I am, and this is the way I'm going to be. You see, when pride rules, we believe we're always right. Pride Month means there's no standards. There is no God, and I will not accept a transcendent power over me that teaches me that there's a proper and unashamed way to live. And so I'll raise my head high, and I will lift my flag, and I will march in front of everyone else, and I will proudly wave it without so much of a discussion about how I might need to be dealt with, how maybe the way I think is wrong. Maybe it needs to be changed. Maybe I need some help from someone. And in doing so, that I, we see here in pride, has attempted to unseat God as the ruler of the universe and plant myself, yourself, this ego into the throne to then decide what we feel is right and what's wrong, what's good and what is evil. The movie Chariots of Fire recounts the true story of two British athletes in the 1924 Olympics. Eric Liddell, a devout Scottish Christian, runs for the glory of God, and Harold Abrahams, who was an English Jew who runs to overcome prejudice. There's a poignant scene in the movie where Eric comes to Jenny, his sister, and he says this thing which I think is so profound. He said to her, "I believe God made me for a purpose, Jenny, but he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure." Brethren, we can be proud of what God has done for us and in us, as well as what God has done for others and in others. We can show pride in the God of the universe and his majesty, because he is the king of the mountain, and he helps us climb it. As the Apostle Paul wrote, "Let everything we do be done for the glory of God."